Over and over in the Quran, Muhammad writes, Jesus is not God. In the Gospels, Jesus claims to be God. So you've got a fundamental contradiction there between Islam and Christianity regarding the identity of Jesus Christ. Stuart?
And the reason why Christianity works more for me personally is because of how it views forgiveness, how it views the nature of God, God's main attributes, God's love. I would consider Allah more of a God of mercy, which I really respect Allah for. But in terms of love, I look to Christ at the cross, which was arguably the best love act we've seen in the history of humanity. Clearly. That's why I brought up a few days ago, Zizek, one of the top philosophers today out of Russia, he said if we want to spread the purest form of love in societies and cultures today, we will accept the Christian ethic of love.
You're talking about the philosopher I was talking about, you guys?
Yes.
Right.
So that's one point. The second point would be eternal destiny. For me, when I speak with my Muslim friends, there's still an insecurity and uncertainty over whether or not they are definitely saved. And understanding the Christian faith, if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. So we can have an absolute security. But I would also have to disagree with many of my Roman Catholic friends. There's also been a lot of insecurity and fear there in the sense of, with purgatory and many other issues to consider, we cannot have certainty whether we are absolutely saved. But the works righteousness based in monotheistic religions is, again, that would be probably what I disagree with most. I don't think I can work towards a morality that will save me eternally because I mess up too much. I'm going to be quite honest. I have a sinful nature, and that comes up all the time. It comes up daily. And so that's why I continuously turn back to the cross, because I need grace, I need forgiveness, I need approval, and out of that approval, then I can live a life of gratitude where I can live more of a moral life.
So,
okay, yes.
Would you say that like your Christian religion is more true than a person who believes in Islam, like a Muslim person?
Depends what you mean by more true.
So, do you believe that there's an absolute truth, like based on your thought?
Yes, I believe, right, exactly what your building says over here, right? The truth will set you free.
There is a single truth, right?
Yes.
And would there be one religion that's more true than another? And would you argue that Christianity is then more true than Islam or Judaism or whatever?
If the resurrection actually occurred, if not, no, I would never get to that point.
Okay.
Because in comparing teachings in Islam, Buddhism, and the Christian faith, I see too many similarities when it comes to morals.
Right.
It's just a message. And so if the good news that Christianity claims through Jesus being the Son of God, dying, and in the historical resurrection, that's a historical fact it claims, if that occurred, then yes, I would say that's the absolute truth.
You're talking in ifs and, what if, right? Would you personally argue that this resurrection occurred?
Yes.
So you do. And is that based on historical evidence? Because I'm talking about you have to, in history, right, in historicism, you have to compare many different sources, and you can't just take, something for granted just because there's one source or a few sources that say that.
Right.
And so you're arguing that that's a fact on historical basis.
Yes.
And also follow up, this is actually brought up by him earlier, maybe 10 minutes ago, about the splitting of the Red Sea, right, with Moses. Would you say that
that one.
would you say that there's historical evidence for that?
Not much.
Not much.
No.
So then why do you believe it?
Well, I didn't say I believed it.
Oh, okay, so
He said that.
He said that. Can I ask you that question?
Yes, I believe that God split the Red Sea open and the Jews went on dry ground through the Red Sea,
Right.
because that has been recorded by the Jewish people.
Okay. And so, if there was a splitting of the Red Sea, would there be also scientific evidence, in the sediments, geologically, that proves this, right? Because that was a massive movement of water.
how on earth could there be archaeological evidence that the Red Sea was split open and the Jews walked through on dry ground? How could that possibly be archaeologically verified?
Or not even necessarily archaeologically. I'm talking about other forms of science, like geology or oceanography. There should be evidence, right, in the sediments. Why not?
Well, sir, if the Red Sea splits and there's a path through the Red Sea and then the waters come back over it, you think that 3,000 years later we're going to be able to go back to the Red Sea and archaeologically show that 3,000 years ago it split open and there was a dry ground and then water came back? It would be impossible.
Wouldn't you want to have at least some sort of evidence, either historically, but also supported with science as well? Because this is something that should be verifiable, right? In either of these studies.
I would go with the flood.
The same thing with the flood?
I would go with the flood.
You would believe in the flood?
No, I would go with it because obviously you need some type of evidence if there was a worldwide flood, not the Red Sea.
Well, why not?
No, it's okay. He's cooking himself, Stuart. Sir, just ask yourself, is it intellectually fair to say, before I can accept that the Red Sea was split open, I have to have archaeological evidence? No, the only archaeological evidence you need to have is that there is a Red Sea. The whole idea that you could have archaeological evidence that the Red Sea split open? No way. It's impossible.
Why?
Because archaeology would not be able to ascertain whether 3,000 years ago the water parted and people walked through. I mean, the footprints in the sand aren't going to last for 3,000 years.
But the movement of water, shouldn't it show some sort of evidence?
No, absolutely not. Jesus turning water into wine. There's going to be no archaeological evidence from any pots that Jesus turned water into wine. Jesus walking on water. No, sir. There's going to be no archaeological evidence in the water that Jesus walked on the water. It's not going to be there.
What evidence is there aside from, the Bible?
The evidence is historical in nature, which is recorded in the Bible.
And are there historians that say that, based on historical evidence, we believe that the Red Sea parted? Is that actually a consensus in the fields of history? Because I don't think it is. And it doesn't seem to me that's the consensus among historians.
There are a lot of hard questions about what is the evidence that the Exodus took place? What's the evidence that the Red Sea split open? But the simple fact is, there is some historical evidence that those events took place. It's not as watertight an argument as the Gospels, that's for sure. We have far more manuscript evidence for the Gospels, for Jesus, than we do for the Red Sea being split open.
And so you're advocating that people should believe things on sparse evidence?
Oh, I am pointing out to you that if you're going to be honest with me, you are living for something you cannot prove. You have faith. Hopefully your faith is based on evidence. I can promise you I cannot prove that what I'm living for is true. Hopefully what I'm living for as being true is based on evidence. No, sir. I cannot prove that the Red Sea was split open. I cannot prove that Jesus walked on water. But the historical evidence is, yes, he did. Why? What does that mean? It means there were eyewitnesses there who saw Jesus walk on water, and they recorded what they wrote. In historical narrative, in the literary style of eyewitness reportage, yes.
Okay, I think we've reached the point. I think what you're essentially arguing now is a nihilistic worldview where nothing can be proven for sure, right?
No, that's not nihilism, sir. That's realism. Prove to me that I'm not just a bad dream you're having.
Can you define nihilism then? The philosophy of nihilism?
Yeah. Nihilism essentially says, well, it depends what type of nihilism you're talking about. Epistemological nihilism says you can't know anything. I disagree strongly with that. I know my son, Stuart. Right. Can I prove him? No, sir. Okay. Can I prove his character? No, sir. I gather evidence, though. I don't just blindly say, Stuart's a really nice guy. No. I say, I have a relationship with him now of about 28 years. I have seen his character develop. I've gone through different experiences with him. I know Stuart. I hope you live your life the same way. I hope you just don't go up to someone you don't have the foggiest idea who they are and start trusting them. Right? That would be really dumb. Instead, you gather evidence of a person's reliability. Okay. And then based on that evidence, you make commitment. I perform weddings all the time. Right. Can I prove, or can the woman prove, that that guy's going to be faithful to her till death parts them, although that's what he says? No, sir. No. But is there evidence, hopefully, that he is going to be faithful to her? I sure hope so. I sure hope before she makes that walk down an aisle to become his wife, that there is solid evidence that he really loves her and he's going to be faithful to her.
Where you draw the line between this solid evidence, right? Things you can see and feel and touch, right? And evidence based on like historical eyewitness reporting, as we call it.
You've got to acknowledge
to the actual like question, not about weddings or like our personal relationships with our friends or family. Let's talk about like what I wanted to talk about, like these miracles that you claim happen.
Sir, you've got to acknowledge there are different forms of knowledge. You've got to acknowledge that there is historical knowledge, which is based on the trustworthiness of eyewitness testimony. There is scientific knowledge, which is based on not eyewitness testimony, it's based on the repeatability of an experiment. If you can't do it in London, England, the way you do it in Austin, Texas, it ain't scientifically true. You've got to be able to consistently repeat it. Well, you don't do that in historical knowledge. You don't repeat Washington's inauguration every September in a lab to prove that Washington really was the first president. So there are different forms of knowledge. There's personal knowledge, where you learn to trust somebody based on evidence that they are trustworthy. So there are different forms of knowledge. And the whole idea that unless you and I can scientifically prove something, it's not true, is a philosophy. Would you please prove to me scientifically that unless you can scientifically prove something, it's not true? You can't do that. Do you see how self-defeating that line of thought is? That unless I can scientifically prove something, it's not true. Really? Please scientifically prove to me that unless you can scientifically prove something, it's not true. Totally fallacious, right? Different forms of knowledge, different types of evidence. Scientific, historical, personal, psychological, different types of evidence. Fair enough? Or did that not make sense?
I see what you're arguing, yeah, but like I still feel like, or I guess what I don't see is that why you're so willing to just like go to the Bible as your fundamental source of knowledge, because that's basically what you're saying. Right?
False, totally false.
Totally false.
When I want to find out about biology, I don't go to the Bible.
Right, but
when I want to find out about U.S. history, I don't go to the Bible. When I want to find out about African history, I don't go to the Bible, okay?
Well, how comprehensive is your understanding of, or how comprehensive, is this power of your God that you believe in, right?
Good point.
Because if he is like, omnipotent and omniscient,
right?
Isn't he actually like the alpha and the omega of existence?
Yeah, he has not chosen to give us any scientific information in the Bible. So I have no scientific information in the Bible. Instead, if I want to learn about process, I go to a biology textbook, a chemistry textbook. I don't go to the Bible. And if I want to learn about U.S. history, I don't go to the Bible. I go to the eyewitness accounts, U.S. history. Right? Isn't that brutally clear?
Yeah.
Or is that confusing?
Well, I would never go to the Bible for U.S. history, basically because there's nothing written about United States history in the Bible, right?
Exactly. The same way there's no science in the Bible.
Right. But you're saying that, there was this God that created the entire universe, right?
Yes.
And has control over the entire universe, yes?
No.
No,
he's partially chosen to limit his power by giving us a free will. Watch. Whack. God made me do it. I'm a con artist. I'm a liar. God did not make me slap him. I chose to slap him. God did not make this sweater. Human beings with a free will and a rational mind did. And God did not make the nuclear bomb. Human beings did.
Right.
And if human beings detonate the nuclear bomb, that's not God detonating the nuclear bomb. That's human beings detonating the bomb. Right?
Create the hydrogen atom that created, that allowed the creation of a nuclear weapon. That allowed
Yes. You bet.
And God also created this ability for humans to, right in the big picture.
That's right. You bet.
Okay. I think
He gave us a free will.
Right. So I think that's up to my willingness to debate this. But
All right.
Pleasure working with you.
Good to meet you, sir. Thank you so much for stepping forward.